Good afternoon and welcome to our special meeting of the budget workshop for the City Council. Today is June 1st, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our City Clerk to please read the roll.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt.
Here.
Councilmember Alvord.
Here.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Here, thank you. I would like to ask our Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce CEO, Wendy Garrick, if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will jump right into public comments. This is now a time for anyone to make a comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here tonight or this afternoon in council chambers that would like to make a comment? And the phone and number for anyone who would like to call in is 916-774-5353. And it doesn't appear that we have any phone calls this evening, and there's no one here that would like to address the council. So I'll close public comment. After each department presentation, we'll have an opportunity for questions, and there'll be no formal action as the budget will be formally adopted later this month on June 16th. And I'd like to introduce our city manager who would take over.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. Mayor Bernasconi, members of City Council. Before jumping into the presentations tonight, I would like to share some high-level overarching comments that will help hopefully provide a little bit of context as we go through the budget tonight. In preparing this year's budget, we prioritized fiscal responsibility, as we always do. But also this year, which is something a little different, as we emerge from the pandemic, we're also focusing on recovery. Recovery from a wide range of impacts that we've experienced as a result of the pandemic this last year. And one of the more unusual impacts that we've experienced is an accelerated growth in our community. The opportunity to work remotely has made it possible for many Bay Area residents to relocate here to Roseville. Money Magazine picked up on this trend in these statistics too. In 2020, Roseville was the only California city named to its list of the 50 best places to live in the country. In addition to that, Roseville was also named the 5th best city in America to live if you work from home. So numbers-wise, we're expecting close to a year with nearly double the historical annual average of single-home permits of around 900. And again, you heard me right, we're expecting to close out this next year at double as well. The last time we saw this pace of growth was really in the early 2000s, before the Great Recession. As we look at our projections for FY 21-22, we see the trend with new subdivisions in Sierra Vista, Fitiment Ranch, Creekview, all adding new units to the inventory, as well as infrastructure and grading to be done for Amoruso Ranch. And as we grow, you'll see an emphasis in the budget for maintaining service levels. That was also a top priority for the revenues of the local sales tax measure approved by voters in 2018. As a full-service city, we provide services through people. And so you'll see an expansion of hiring in next year's proposed budget after several years of suppressed hiring due to fiscal uncertainty leading out of the recession. Strategic growth is another focus in this proposed budget. That means ensuring development is paying its own way, and along with the development comes amenities for the community that we can all enjoy. Advancing our council priorities is a theme woven throughout this entire budget. You'll see a support for safety, health, economic vitality, and infrastructure. From a fiscal soundness perspective, this proposed budget makes progress towards achieving targets in our reserve funds and paying down our unfunded liabilities, creating capacity in future budgets for growth that we'll need. As well as this additional capacity in future years, we're also considering ways to create new revenues to help diversify revenues coming into the citywide budget. And as you look at it, this budget is bigger than last year. There are many factors driving that growth that I'd like to share. Workload has increased due to the growth of the city and due to the loss of experienced staff and to retirements and to transfers. It's just not sustainable to maintain service levels without adding employees in fiscal year 21-22. At this point, we're already experiencing longer lead time, some project delays, increased customer and resident complaints and concerns, as well as seeing a loss of the ability to control many of the contract maintenance that we have throughout the city, whether it be through custodial, contract maintenance. It's important to have staff oversee those to make sure quality control can be done. And you'll see some of that in this budget as well. Growth in the city means more areas to serve and more infrastructure to maintain. The city population has grown nearly 22% since 2010. And as an example of this to share in parks, recreation, and libraries and just park operations since 2017, the city's added 16 parks or 218 additional park acreages. In that, we've included 7 new baseball fields and softball fields, 3 new soccer fields, and these types of sports amenities acquire an additional higher level maintenance than a traditional neighborhood park. We've added 63 new streetscape acres, and in the same 5-year period, you've seen the position allocations for park operations to actually be reduced by 1. In this 5-year period, our total budget for salaries and contract and park maintenance have increased by only 8%, while the increase in growth has been 23%. And I share this as one example. I could have went through many departments to share, but I think the park one is very tangible and easy to see where we've seen this type of growth. And so over the last few years, we've seen some gaps grow, and this budget, we look for an opportunity over the past few years to make up some ground and help cover those gaps. As well, new regulations continue to impact the citywide on a citywide level. Both environmental utilities and the police department are examples you'll see tonight in their presentations, where we've had to add staff to not only comply with regulations, but also to maintain service levels. The budget reflects an expansion in services in our community due to council priorities focusing on preventing homelessness and addressing those issues that are related to those experiencing homelessness. We're focusing on housing initiatives, our police social services unit, legislative advocacy, and then blight-related issues that are impacting not only our parks and open spaces, but some of our corridors. And as we move out of the general fund and talk about our capital improvement program and our focus areas, I'd like to share that we continue to make great headway in this area for our capital improvement obligations. The goal is to ensure that we maintain reliability and keep long-term costs in check through regular monitoring, maintenance, replacement, modernization of all of our infrastructure. Given our assets across all departments and throughout the city's geographic footprint, this takes considerable investment. Much of the CIP, or the capital improvement funding, is through fiscal year 21-22 is dedicated to multi-year large projects that will ensure our systems remain stable and secure and reliable in our growing city, as well as a changing regulatory environment. Currently, our program is fairly well funded in the utilities, but it is significantly underfunded across the general fund, particularly in streets and parks. Our current level of investment is more reactive than it is proactive, and that's something over the coming years we will look to improve on. The areas we really focus on is rehabilitation, which is really investing in our aging infrastructure, as many of our systems reach the end of life and need attention before issues do get worse and become more expensive to fix. This is the largest portion of our capital improvement funding. Our CIP program also focuses on modernization. We continue to evolve. Technology touches everything we do. And the expectations with that growth of our residents, it grows along with that demand. We continue to invest in technology that optimizes our infrastructure and creates better user interface, efficiencies, and also stronger cybersecurity, which has become a significant issue in the recent years. Regulatory compliance is another area that continues to add cost in our CIP program. As regulations change, we must adapt to put into place new facilities and programs that comply. And this is a cost driver in the areas of information technology, utilities, and streets. Our staff are often asked, why are we getting rid of perfectly good curbs and gutters when we're resurfacing our streets? And we have to remind them that this is really part of an ADA compliance where new ramps have to be installed anytime we resurface a road. It's not something we do voluntarily. Why we do it? Because it's a regulatory compliance, and that adds cost. It adds significant cost. And lastly, the area you'll see is growth-related. As a result of growth, we add new parks, trails, streets, utilities, and other infrastructure that must be built to maintain our service levels and keep our general plan commitments. Through intentional planning, we're able to recover most of these costs through development fees to ensure that new growth pays its way. But the new revenues and the costs have increased the size of our budget. With that context, I would like to cover tonight's presentation and then turn it over to our finance team led by our Chief Financial Officer and Assistant City Manager, Dennis Kaufman. And with that, I will jump into an overview of the presentation. So tonight, we'll have the budget overview, which I'll be providing shortly. Dennis will provide a financial summary and an economic summary, while Scott will talk more a little about the specific general fund and utility budgets at a high level. Then each of our operating departments will give an overview of their individual department budgets and what's really kind of driving the growth, what are the new areas in their budget, and what are some of the trends that they're seeing. And then we'll close. And as the mayor mentioned, we will break for questions between each section, ensuring there's public comment and time for obviously any council questions or comments from folks who are here in the audience as well. And as you know, our council process and our budget process is an extensive process every year. I say this, and I know you live it, and it starts as soon as it ends every year. And so as you can see here on April 29th, which is kind of the kickoff, where we had our council goals update. We worked on making sure that we were still aligned with our council goals and where we were working towards. As you can see, while we did update some of the strategies and priorities, the council goals did remain, which were remaining fiscally responsible in a changing world, supporting community engagement through our advocacy, maintaining a safe and healthy community, enhancing economic vitality, delivering exceptional services, and investing in well-planned infrastructure and growth. And you'll see that those themes will reoccur over and over tonight in the presentation as the budget aligns strongly with council priorities. As we go through on April 7th, our first part of the budget process, we looked at long-term pension and other post-employment benefits and liabilities. On April 21st, we did a capital improvement projects and previews for fiscal year 21-22, which covered much of the information I shared in my opening comments. On May 5th, we brought forward our financial policies and updated our policies for fiscal year 21-22. And then here we are today in our first budget hearing. And I share this really to show the overall extensive process with approving a budget of this size and this magnitude. It'd be very difficult to do it over just 1 or 2 days. That's why we do it over several meetings. So it's consumable, it's understandable, and there's there's a lot of opportunities along the way to ask questions and engage. And so we'll go through the budget presentation. We'll talk about the current fiscal position trends. Each department will give an operation overview. And then on the 16th, it'll be before you to be considered for adoption, which by our charter then will go into place and into practice on July 1st. Our outreach, while a little different due to the pandemic and the results of COVID-19, we certainly still made it a goal to get out into the public and share the budget document. One of the things before you tonight and are in the dais, on the dais and also in the chambers, our budget and brief, which is a great tool, educational tool for the recommended budget. It shares an overview, shares where our funds, how they come in, how they go out, and what the priorities are. We also posted these as well as our full budget on the website. We shared it through our e-newsletter, all of our social media channels. In addition to that, our partners who we work with regularly, like our Sun City, Roseville Coalition Neighbors, our Chamber of Commerce, and had labor meeting with all of our labor groups last week to talk about the proposed budget and what they would find in the budget, trying to be completely transparent all the way through. And what this really does is it helps build trust. One of the things I would like to share, and we covered this in the goals workshop on the 29th, is we did just participate in the National Community Survey in partnership with County Managers Association. And one of the things that came out are something I think that really this council, our staff, and this community really should be proud of is not only did we rank highly, but really in some of the areas nationally the highest, and the value of services our residents felt they were getting for their tax dollars, the direction the city is taking, generally acting in the best interest of the community. These are all areas that as your city manager, I'm extremely proud of working and partnering with the city council and our staff to drive the kind of numbers that we saw. And this budget, I think, reflects that. Reflects that it's a support and it's a building on the foundation that we've been working towards for years here in the city. And so while it's an extensive process and it is a heavy lift, I think it's worthwhile, and I think the community expects it and deserves it. So we look at the purpose for tonight, and it's really, it's wrapped up here in these 3 bullet points, is that we want to define the city's overall budget, really looking at the general fund, which is your police, your fire, parks, public works, and then looking at our enterprise funds, which are our utilities, and covering through our utilities, and then also things that maybe people don't think of as enterprise funds, like our adventure club for our youth programs, and then also our golf courses, which are also enterprise funds. And so looking at those and the health of those funds and how we're doing, which are largely rate-based versus being funded through property taxes and sales taxes or direct fees. Define the city's general fund budget within revenues, expenses, share some of the challenges we're facing, and then also look at some of the trends that we're seeing and adjusting for. And Dennis will talk a lot about that in the 5-year plan. And then we'll receive council confirmation, directions, and recommendations to do largely what this budget does, which is maintain service levels in a growing city, address new state and federal mandates, and then look at enhancing service levels in some of the areas we identified in the April 29th Council Goals Workshop, which were largely focused around homelessness concerns and blight and economic vitality. And those are all found in this budget as well. And I fell short if I didn't mention Measure B priorities because it was such a big focus over the last couple of years. I also wanted to let the community know, this council know, that the commitments made through Measure B are in this budget currently. We were maintaining our essential services that we committed to. We maintained the restored services that were put in the budget last year, such as bringing the library hours back, bringing our goats back to some of the general fund open space areas, which are really instrumental in helping deal with fire hazards from overgrowth and thatch management that needs to occur. Our park maintenance standard levels being increased back up to really areas that had been taken away as we were looking to help make sure revenues and expenses matched leading up to Measure B, putting those back in. And then our 4th of July activities. Unfortunately, this last year due to COVID, we did not have the 4th of July activities, but they were funded, and if it was allowed to happen, it would have happened. We are looking very much forward to the 4th of July celebrations coming up next month, which are in the budget, and we'll be ready to go. Maintaining the priority service levels, the police beat are 7. We actually added 7 police officers in the last year's budget, and in addition, we've added some since then with our partnership with Sutter and the Roseville High School District as well, and then an additional officer in traffic. So I think that everything that was listed in Measure B that was added into the budget is maintained in the budget and is proposed to be maintained in the budget before you this evening for consideration. Oh, can't forget about mentioning this one. The fiscal health piece was a very big part, and the reserves are a part of what we'll be talking about tonight. Being fully funded at the end of this budget is something that I think that this council and staff I know are very proud of, and was a big priority not only for us but for the community as part of the Measure B feedback, and paying down the retiree health and some of the other funded liabilities, creating that ongoing capacity for operational costs that will be needed in future years is a part of this budget as well. And those reserves, just as a reminder, what they do is they really help us maintain service levels in either a short-term or long-term recession. It helps us in making immediate knee-jerk decisions and making thoughtful decisions down the road, or I'd say even more importantly, not making temporary cuts or permanent cuts for a temporary problem, right? Those reserves help us do that. And so in summary, as we look at this budget, maintains our fiscal responsibility, aligns with our strategic plans. We're living within our means, and we're providing all of our core service and maintaining those service levels. Some of the concerns that you'll see will come up tonight is the uncertain impacts of COVID-19 on the economy. You know, as stimulus checks stop coming in, as utility bills are due and rent is due, what will that do to the economy? Not this year or next year, but maybe 2 years from now. There's still that concern. We don't have have a crystal ball, and Dennis will share a little bit on the economic outlook. Limited room for growth without new resources or revenue as you go out into the 4, 5, 6 year plan and you start seeing we know where our costs are going. We know where our expenses are going, and they're all going up, right? And so we have to make sure that we manage that as we go forward. And so there's really limited room to grow at the pace I think the community needs and desires and wants. So we have to be thoughtful. We have to be thoughtful about how we grow, where we grow, and new revenue streams to help support that growth. And in the general fund, the capital needs, our infrastructure is growing, and while many of our new areas are funded through the CFDs, many of our general fund areas are not. And so I'll give Public Works a plug here. They are excellent at getting grant funding and getting funding outside of the general fund to help maintain that. And so what we need to do is take on that charge and be as creative in other areas as well. And we'll continue to focus on Measure B priorities, maintaining our service levels as we've committed, focus on those high priority new service areas that were identified as high priorities and that we identify each year in our workshops as well. Build, maintain the stabilization reserve fund, and then lastly, paying down those long-term liabilities with the goal of creating capacity in future budgets. So with that, I think that wraps up my portion of the presentation to help kick off. I'd be happy to take any questions before we go to Dennis and his team.
Council have any questions of Dom? Started? All right, we'll keep going.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bernasconi, City Council members.
Good afternoon.
Dennis Kaufman, your Assistant City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. With me tonight is Scott Pettengill, the city's budget manager. Thanks, Tom, for setting the stage and for the introduction. Scott's going to present an overview of the citywide budget and the proposed staffing levels and an overview of the proposed general fund budget. And then I will present an update of the city's general fund reserves, the recommended additional payments to CalPERS, the updated 5-year general fund forecast, and the proposed budgets for the general government departments. Then we'll have a break for questions before the police chief and the other department heads present their budgets. So before I turn the presentation over to Scott, I wanted to commend him and the budget team for delivering this proposed budget for the community. And I want to briefly summarize the proposed budget, which is based on the assumption that the local Roseville economy will continue to recover over the next fiscal year. However, I did want to point out that economists in California and throughout the nation acknowledge that there is some financial and economic uncertainty that will continue to exist surrounding the unprecedented levels of federal stimulus and other fiscal and monetary actions that have been taken to address the pandemic. And that we're still seeing a variety of supply chain challenges in numerous industries you've probably heard about in the news, including some that may directly or indirectly affect the local economy here in Roseville. We'll be paying close attention to that. And there's concern about whether the federal stimulus and some of the other measures will prompt significant inflation pressures as the economy continues to recover. But with all of this uncertainty, as part of the context for this proposed budget, the augmentations in the budget, as Dom outlined, largely fall into 3 categories: of maintaining service levels as Roseville's growing, addressing new state and federal mandates, and enhancing service levels for council's strategic priorities. And I believe it's worth highlighting that maintaining current service levels in Roseville requires the budget to grow for new positions to address growth, but also for cost increases to remain competitive in the labor market, including known pension and medical costs. And the other costs of doing business are also continuing to increase, like fuel and utilities and software licenses and all the other types of expenses that the city incurs. So as we talk about expenditure growth in the citywide budget, in the general fund, and in the utilities, it's important to keep in mind that the budget grows as the cost of doing business increases to provide the city's current high levels of service. I'll now turn it over to Scott to present the citywide budget, the proposed staffing levels, and an overview of the general fund budget.
Thank you, Dennis. As Dennis mentioned, I'll start with an overview of the citywide budget. First, citywide revenues. The citywide revenue budget totals $613.7 million. This pie chart provides a breakdown of the revenue by type of fund. The largest slice of the pie is the city's enterprise funds, which includes Roseville Electric and environmental utilities, and then includes water, wastewater, and waste services, as well as Roseville Transit and Adventure Club program in the Youth Development Fund. The enterprise funds comprise 54% of city revenues at $331 million. The next largest slice of the budget by fund type is the general fund, which consists of 28% of city revenues at $176 million. The other remaining 18% is comprised of special revenue funds at 5%, capital project funds at 6%, and fiduciary funds at 7%. Special revenue funds total $30.7 million and include landscape and lighting districts, gas tech funds for street maintenance, and golf funds. Capital project funds total $36.8 million and include park development funds, the traffic mitigation fund, and other development fee funds. Finally, fiduciary funds total $43 million and included trust and agency funds, including the OPEB Trust Fund, the Redevelopment Successor Agency Trust Fund, community facility districts that collect special tax revenue to repay bonds for finance infrastructure. Moving on to citywide expenditures. Citywide expenditures total $571.1 million. This pie chart breaks the expenditures down by type of fund. The enterprise fund make up 55% of citywide expenditures, or $315 million. General fund expenditures make up 31% of citywide expenditures, or $176 million. And the remaining 14% consist of fiduciary funds, special revenue, and capital project funds totaling $80 million. Next, I'll provide an overview of citywide staffing levels. This table lists the proposed position augmentations by department. The new positions are being recommended to maintain service levels in our growing city, address new state and federal mandates, and enhance service levels for council's strategic priorities. A total of 40.25 net additional positions are included in this budget, which will increase the total position count from 1,220 to 1,260 positions. I'm not going to go into detail on every position augmentation because those will be covered in the individual department presentations. I'll be highlighting the position adds in the city manager's office, human resources, and economic development department. The position in the city manager's office is an analyst for special project research in areas of homelessness and new revenue concepts. The economic development position is a housing analyst to assist with affordable housing and homelessness. And the HR position is an analyst to help staff keep up with recruitments and add capacity to update citywide systems. The purpose of this next slide is to show that the staffing levels in the general fund are much lower than before the Great Recession. Although some work has been contracted out where it makes sense, the number of general fund employees included in the 22 budget are 70% lower than staffing levels in 2007. Also, the graph on the right shows that the city has grown in population by close to 40,000 since 2007. The number of general fund staff per 1,000 residents is well below the level before the Great Recession at 5.2 employees per 1,000 residents. Next, I'll move on to the general fund, and I'll first cover general fund revenues. Although some economic uncertainty still exists, the proposed budget is based on assumption that the local economy recovers by the end of 22. The city's largest sales tax source, the Bradley-Burns sales tax, is expected to recover by 6.4% this year and 6% in 22, before it returns to normal growth rate in the range of 2 to 4%. The Measure B local sales tax is expected to recover by 4.5% this year and 2.5% in 22. The revenue budget for Measure B is $21.2 million in 22. Local sales tax didn't decline as much during the pandemic because it captures more of the internet sales activity, which was up during the pandemic. So the rate of recovery isn't as high of a growth rate than it was in the Bradley-Burns sales tax. Property tax revenues continue to grow faster than the Prop 13 growth rate limit of 2% based on rising property values and growth in the city. Also, it's important to note that Roseville has to share some of the property tax revenue growth with the county under its annexation tax sharing agreements. This slide provides a pie chart of general fund revenues by revenue type. The general fund revenue budget totals $177 million in 22. The largest revenue sources for the general fund are sales tax, consisting of Bradley Burns sales tax at $60 million and Measure B sales tax at $21 million, and property tax at $57.6 million. These revenue streams represent approximately 78% of general fund revenues. The remaining 22% consist over 100 revenue lines, including franchise fees for cable and electric utility for using the public right-of-way, totaling $8.9 million, charges for service at $10.5 million, transfers in at $7.3 million, other taxes, including the TOT, total $4.6 million, and finally, other revenues total $6.7 million and include things like licenses, permits, and grants. This slide provides a layer cake graph showing the 10-year history of general fund revenues broken out between sales tax, property tax, and other taxes and revenues. The graph shows the first full year of sales tax revenue from Measure B in fiscal year 20, which offset the decline in the Bradley Burns sales tax due to the pandemic. Bradley Burns revenue ended fiscal year 20, $2.5 million below budget estimates due to the pandemic economic downturn. The graph also shows the reduction in other tax and revenues as a proportion of general fund revenues due to COVID-19. This other category includes reductions in the TOT revenue in the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Department programs, and the city's Passport Center. This next graph provides a multi-year comparison of sales tax revenue, including collection of Measure B in fiscal year 19. Sales tax revenues have more than doubled since 2012 from $39 million to $81 million, thanks in part by the voters passing Measure B. The proposed budget includes $60 million in Bradley Burns revenues and $21 million in Measure B. The dip and subsequent uptick in revenues in fiscal 18 and 19 is primarily due to a state software upgrade that resulted in a delay in receiving some sales tax revenues until fiscal year 19. This slide provides a 10-year history of the city's property tax revenues and the amount budgeted for fiscal year 22 at $58 million. The city is experiencing relatively consistent growth of property tax revenue due to the growth in the city and rising property values. So far, we're not seeing any significant impact on property tax revenues related to the pandemic. So I'll move on to general fund expenditures. This slide provides a pie chart of general fund expenditures by department. The total general fund expenditure budget totals $176 million. Police and fire budgets total $86.6 million, or $49 million and $37.6 million, respectively. The Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Department expenditure budget totals $27.4 million. The other expenditures totaling $31 million include budgets that don't align with any of the other operating budgets and includes things as the transfers to other funds, including economic stabilization reserves and advanced CalPERS payment that Dennis will speak to in a little bit later. The general government category of $11.2 million includes the city council, city manager, city clerk, city attorney, finance, and HR budgets. The balance of the expenditure budget includes the Development Services Department at $10.3 million, Public Works Department at $8.4 million, and the Economic Development Department at $900,000. This chart provides an overview of general fund spending on a percentage basis. One of the primary takeaways for this chart is that police and fire make up approximately half of the general fund expenditures at 49%. The balance of the funding is used to support parks, recreation, libraries, general government functions, development services, public works, and economic development. Next, I'll provide an overview of how much of our general fund budget is available for discretionary spending by the City Council during this budget process. First, we look at the general fund revenues that are restricted because they are charged for a specific purpose. These revenues reimburse the city for providing specific services, so if we cut those services, we would not bring in that revenue. These expenditures are not discretionary because they are reimbursed by these revenues, and the total amount of restricted revenues included in this budget is $33.8 million. Next, we look at expenses that are based on contracts and agreements or current city policy, such as tax sharing, annexation payments to the county, and retiree health benefits for retirees. There's a total of $23.2 million of non-discretionary spending using these parameters in the '22 budget. Once you reduce the total citywide budget of $614 million down to the general fund operating budget by peeling off the budgets from the other funds, such as the enterprise funds and the special revenue funds, we arrive at the general fund operating budget of $176 million. From the general fund operating expenditure budget of $176, we subtract expenditures with the restricted revenue offsets of $34 million. And then we subtract those non-discretionary expenses, total $23 million. This results in a discretionary spending of $119 million. At the bottom of the slide, we note that $70 million, or 59% of this discretionary spending, is budgeted in the police and fire departments, leaving about $49.4 million for the rest of the general fund departments. This is important to note because it illustrates that the amount of funding that is available for discretionary spending is much smaller than the total general fund operating expenditure budget of $176 million. So this concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll hand it over back to Dennis to cover reserves and CalPERS ADP.
Thanks, Scott. So first I wanted to give you a brief update on the general fund reserves. After taking into account the growing costs in the general fund of city operations and the recommended augmentations that are included in the proposed budget, the proposed budget includes a transfer of $2.4 million of general fund resources into the economic stabilization reserve to achieve the council policy target of 15% of general fund operating expenditures. And the budget transfers $1.2 million into the general fund emergency reserve to maintain the council policy target of 10% of general fund operating expenditures. The purpose of the stabilization reserve is to address revenue shortfalls caused by future economic downturns, and the purpose of the city's emergency reserve is to address expenditures necessary during an emergency. With the reserves up to the policy targets based on the proposed budget, staff recommends taking an additional step this year to address the city's pension liabilities with CalPERS. The City Council established a strategy to address pension liabilities after the general fund reserve targets are met under its strategic plan goal to remain fiscally responsible. The proposed budget includes $6,145,000 for the city's first additional discretionary payments, or ADP, as they're referred to by CalPERS. For context, I pulled in some information from the most recent CalPERS actuarial valuations. The city's overall funded status ratio is about 65% combined for the public safety and miscellaneous employee actuarial valuations. The city's total unfunded liability is $387 million. That's the portion of the total liability that isn't currently funded. The total liability, if you recall, is about $1.1 billion. And the annual cost built into the proposed budget for next fiscal year is about $45 million across all of the city's funds for CalPERS pension costs. So that $6.145 million payment that we're recommending as part of the proposed budget has many benefits. The benefits of making one of these additional payments is not only does it pay down that unfunded liability, that has the impact of increasing the funded status of the plan. But the biggest benefit is the future benefit, which is it reduces our future pension costs by, in this case, by making this $6 million deposit by about $400,000 a year for 20 years based on the layer of amortization in our pension liability that we select. And so the layers that we're looking at would net the city about $400,000 a year of pension cost savings for 20 years. And so that would be the primary benefit of making that deposit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into the 5-year general fund forecast. So the forecast is built on many assumptions for the various revenue and expenditure categories of the general fund. The updated forecast that I'm going to present tonight assumes recovery from the recession is complete by the end of next fiscal year. It includes the known increases in CalPERS contributions, and it follows the OPEB funding policy, as well as the Capital Improvement Program rehabilitation funding policies that have been adopted by Council, and it's based on known state and federal mandates. However, the 5-year forecast does not include federal stimulus funding yet, since it's not an ongoing funding source. It's really a one-time funding source. The forecast also doesn't include impacts of future regulations or new revenue sources that are not yet approved by the City Council. And this updated forecast also doesn't reflect the recommended additional discretionary payment to CalPERS, since this council hasn't approved the budget appropriation to make that payment yet. Once we have the proposed budget adopted, we will work towards updating this forecast to reflect that additional $400,000 a year of savings based on that one payment. The 5-year forecast is developed first by estimating future growth rates of general fund revenues. Since the future is uncertain, as Dom mentioned, we don't have a working crystal ball yet. We build a base scenario and a more optimistic and less optimistic scenario. The 3 scenarios start with the fiscal year 2022 revenue of approximately $177 million and grows to between $201 and $216 million 6 years later. So the difference in the final year of the forecast between the more favorable outlook and the less favorable outlook is about $15 million. This next graph represents the general fund expenditure forecast, starting at $170 million for fiscal year 2022. That does not include the additional payment to CalPERS, and grows to over $215 million over the next 6 years. The assumptions for expenditure growth in this forecast include 6 new positions each year funded by the general fund to maintain city service levels while keeping up with growth. And you may recall in prior years when I've presented the 5-year forecast, we based it on an assumption of adding 4 new positions per year, but we're realizing as the city is growing, it's going to take more than 4 new general fund positions per year to keep up with the growth to maintain city service levels. So we've updated the assumption to add 6 new positions funded by the general fund. The assumptions also include modest compensation increases to maintain competitive salary and benefits, plus known pension cost increases that we have learned about from the actuarial reports, and medical premium increases we have to estimate because they continue to grow at a higher rate than inflation. So this next graph plots the 3 revenue scenarios on top of that expenditure forecast. And you can see the revenue line starts above the bar on the far left in fiscal year 2022. That's allowing us to make that payment to CalPERS. But then, depending on the scenario, falls below the top of the expenditure bar somewhere between fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2027. It's a little hard to see there with the lines so close. So on the next slide, we provide a close-up view that shows the same data on a different scale to make it a little easier to see the difference between the 3 separate revenue lines and when they could potentially fall below the forecasted expenditure bars. The less favorable outlook has a deficit in fiscal year 2025, while the more favorable outlook has the expenditures catching up with the revenues in fiscal year 2027. Finally, we like to include an example recession forecast, and I want to explain that the purpose of this is really just to recognize the importance of long-term financial planning and the financial policies that this council has adopted. The dotted purple line reflects an example recession starting in fiscal year 2024 and having lasting impacts for several years. Staff are not predicting when the next recession may occur, but we believe it's important to keep the risk in mind. Maintaining the Economic Stabilization Reserve Fund will be critical for the city to navigate the first couple years of future recessions. As this graph depicts, a recession about half as deep and half as long as the Great Recession would have a significant impact on our revenues and require significant reductions in services. This scenario assumes about a $61 million loss cumulatively over those years. with full recovery happening beyond the forecast. The stabilization reserve may not entirely eliminate the need to reduce services for a recession this size, but it will give the city time to adjust prudently. Again, I want to reiterate that this recession forecast is an example scenario, that our 5-year forecast is based on many, many assumptions that are not expected to be accurate. The takeaway from the 5-year forecast overall is that while Measure B and the rest of the general fund tax revenue portfolio is allowing the city to maintain the city's services and Roseville's quality of life, the city needs to continue to be vigilant in preparing for the future by maintaining those reserves, building future capacity in the budget with tools like this additional discretionary payment to CalPERS, as well as continuing to look for ways to be more efficient and looking for new revenue sources. So finally, before you hear from many of the other departments, I want to briefly provide an overview of the general government departments as well as the economic development department before you hear from each of the larger departments about their budgets. First, I wanted to point out the reduction in the city council budget is primarily the result of transferring the budget for an advocacy consultant contract to the Public Affairs and Communications Department where it's managed. That's the only reason why the city council budget went down. The city manager's budget increased primarily due to increases for consultant contracts associated with special projects to advance council goals, including addressing homelessness. The city clerk's budget includes funding to complete the redistricting efforts this year. The city attorney's budget shows a slight decrease there, and it provides a great opportunity for me to mention the city's indirect cost allocation plan, because the attorney's budget did increase for labor costs and services and supply costs, but overall the budget looks reduced because other city funds are allocated a larger amount of the attorney's budget next year in the cost allocation plan, which brings in more reimbursements to the general fund, making it look like their net budget went down. But those additional reimbursements offset those cost increases. The finance department's budget was reduced significantly to recognize the transfer of the utility billing division, both staff and their budget, to the electric department, where they will be managed starting this coming July. The human resources budget includes its risk management funds for workers' compensation and general liability. And in prior years, it included costs for dental and vision insurance premiums in the HR budget. That's why it looks like their budget is going down. Those citywide dental and vision premiums are paid from a separate fund and have been moved out of the HR department budget to the other expenditure category of our budget for next year. And so that's why it looks like their budget went down. The information technology department budget reflects growth in its labor costs as well as services and supplies to maintain current service levels. Software licenses and a lot of the other technology costs continue to increase. And then finally, the public affairs and communications budget, although it took on that advocacy consultant, it's also showing as a net reduction because primarily lower spending in the cable TV PEG fund, which had some capital outlay in the current year, but does not have that level of expenditures in the proposed budget for next year. So in addition to these general government departments, I also wanted to mention the Economic Development Department, who has a budget of a little over $3 million in the proposed budget, with over $800,000 coming from the general fund. The rest of their budget comes from a variety of housing funds, as well as the community development block grant funding. The proposed housing analyst position that Scott mentioned for economic development in the proposed budget will allow Roseville to participate more fully in regional coordination efforts to address homelessness. So with that overview of the citywide budget and the general fund budget and the general government departments and the economic development department, let's break for some questions before hearing from the police chief and some of the other department directors about their department budgets. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Does the council have any questions of Dennis or Scott before we move into the departmental updates?
Maybe it's just a comment. Just really appreciate seeing all the reducing future pensions costs and looking at ways that we can put down reduce costs in the future for making wise decisions now. So that was good.
Anything else?
Yeah, a couple of questions, if I might. So, great, I'm so happy that we have the ability to pay down unfunded liability. I think you shared with me, the way to explain this is it's like making an additional principal payment on your house, right? So this is terrific. I mean, 400 times 20, can't do math in my head, but that's a lot of money that we're going to save. The question is, the state is also going to pay down some of their, so this would be on top of, the question is, how does that work?
No,
right?
that's a great question, and a number of people are asking that question. The state's pension system within CalPERS is separate from all of the different local agency pension
excellent.
trusts.
Okay.
So each government has their, for the most part, with the exception of very small governments, most of the larger governments like the city of Roseville, we have our own separate accounts. And so the additional payments the state is making are not going to benefit us, just like ours is not going to benefit them.
Thank you very much for that simple and understandable explanation. Scott, on the property tax revenue, that includes, while there's a 4% increase, homeowners are capped at 2s and escalating. So the property tax revenue includes single-family, multifamily. Does it also include non-residential, commercial, schools, parks? What's in there that's not, the homeowner wouldn't necessarily think of?
It does include commercial properties, but for the most part, schools and parks are not taxed for property tax revenue.
Okay.
Government-owned properties and many nonprofit-owned properties are not taxed for property taxes.
Okay. Can we put up that last chart or the last table? And Scott, I'm going to say thank you. I never knew what that one chart was. It's called a layer cake, huh? I've seen plenty of pie charts and donut graphs and things, but I've never had a thanks for that. So help me, if somebody sees $95,000 on a city council line and 0 FTEs, that's not us. We're not getting $95,000. What is the staffing? What is behind the number?
So there is no staffing behind the number other than the costs of the city council. And like you said, that does not add up to $95,000.
Right. I mean, it's producing documents, supplies, a variety of things. It's not $95,000 in compensation for the council. You can come back another.
We can provide you some detail of what's in that number.
No, I think it's important for any of the public that's, that digs deep into the budget to, if you see 0 full-time equivalents and then the 5 of us sitting up here, I don't want, erroneous conclusions. And so one comment. I know this will sound esoteric, but during the last 15 months, we've all found some comfort in some guidance either by Mark Twain or Soren Kierkegaard, right? And I think this is reflective of what the task before you and our executive management team was. And it says, life can only be understood backwards, but it has to be lived forward. So, and I think we're in the same position right now. So you have only two of the, how many people that put this budget together that are named here, right? So it looks like 7. So if they're watching, thank you very much for all the work they do as well.
Thank you for pointing that out, and I just want to mention it takes a couple hundred people to really pull together all the data that comes in here, and you'll hear from some of them after us.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Scott.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Scott.
I have one question on we're expecting a high recovery rate on the sales tax over the next year, and then we expect it to drop back down. Is that reason because it's just so low right now that it looks like a big jump? That's
correct.
So we're not seeing some boost coming up?
No.
Okay. Abnormal boost. And the other thing, our vice mayor talked about paying down our debt paying $6 million now saves $8 million 20 years from now. If I did my math right, so that's a $2 million savings, basically, gain over time. That's about a 25% over 20 years. Is that a pretty decent rate of return, I assume?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a good idea then. That was it. Thanks.
Better than Bitcoin, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. If you time it right.
All right, I think that's all for our questions and comments.
Okay.
Much.
Did you want to open it up to the public?
Public comment?
Yes, thank you. We'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to address the council on this item? Or anyone at home? This is the time to call in, too, if you'd like to comment. The number is 916-774-5353. I usually say there is a delay, so I don't think anyone's calling in. So we will close public comment and proceed with the presentations.
I think our police chief, Troy Bergstrom, is up next. Cue his PowerPoint up.
All right, good evening, Mayor Burness, or good afternoon still, it's not quite
I know, I
evening
keep
yet.
getting messed up on that, too.
Minutes. Good afternoon, Mayor Bernasconi and Council. I'm Troy Bergstrom, and I am your Chief of Police, and I'm pleased to present you with the budget proposal for the Police Department. I'll outline our department structure, give you an overview of our budget operating costs across our major divisions and units, and then outline the highlights of additions to this year's budget proposal. These highlights include new position requests and increases for new programs, as well as the inevitable increases in costs related to some of the contracts we use for services. Our department is structured in three major divisions. The first is operations, where our patrol division and special operations units live. And then our services unit, which houses all of our special assignment units like detectives, social services unit, traffic enforcement, and others. And finally, our support services division, which houses things like our communications center, our records unit, and other units that support the operations of the police department. For our budget, we're broken up a little differently than our department divisions, and it's broken up by the 8 major units from these divisions and includes our fleet vehicle expenses. When it comes to those fleet vehicle expenses, as you know, we are currently in the process of replacing our vehicle fleet with hybrid vehicles, and that process will continue this year as we rotate out additional vehicles as their life cycle ends and we replace them with hybrid patrol vehicles. This is our overall budget request for the coming year. It's just shy of $49 million. As a police department, we are a people-oriented operation, so the vast majority of our budget revolves around personnel costs rather than supply costs. This budget request for this year at just shy of $49 million is an increase of about 4.7% over our budget last year, which was $46.75 million. As far as our budget highlights, the first part is new position requests, of which there are 3 and sort of a half. The half is the first one, which is the reclassification of a police officer position to our range master. Previously, this position was a professional staff person. It is very difficult to find someone that meets the qualifications we need in a range master in a professional staff position. We got lucky the last couple of years in the person that we had in that job, but there's really no way around it. This needs to be a police officer position. They're tasked with the training of all of our officers in our range. And a new addition that we've added to them is follow-up investigations related to gun crimes, so they can go back and track where these guns come from. And we really need a police officer to do that. And so this position is a reclassification where we're going to move extra funding in to move this from what the previous cost was into being a police officer. We've actually been doing this since almost the end of last summer, where we moved a police officer into this position. And so really this will allow us to backfill where we borrowed that position from in our budget. The next one is a records supervisor position. This is a second supervisor in our records unit. And this is solely related to all of the new mandates that we're getting, both from the federal government and the state. I'll use one of them as an example, which is NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. This is the new system we'll be going to of how we report crimes to the federal government and how they determine things like our crime rate. In the old system, our records unit was responsible for reporting 8 categories. In the new system, it's over 60 categories. And this is just one of the many mandates that we're getting both federally and from the state. The other one that's up there is the RIP Act, the Racial Identity Profiling Act, which we begin reporting on the end of this year, which requires additional reporting and work by our records unit. It's simply too much for one supervisor to handle, because not only do they have to handle all of these tasks, they have to manage our day-to-day operations of our records unit, and this will allow us to have a second person in there to help with all these tasks. The third additional position, or position that's on there, is a property clerk, is a new position. This is directly related to the proposal you'll see on our next slide about a body camera program. In looking at how other police departments and agencies have implemented body camera programs, one of the things we've discovered is you can't add a program and not add somebody to manage it. And this position will manage all of the video evidence that comes with our officers recording their activities all day long. And then the last one is a community service officer position. This is assigned in our investigations unit. This is directly related to the state changes in how they will mandate the sex offender registry program. This begins July 1st. They have added a whole slew of new tasks that are required, including processes for offenders to come off the registry. It's an immense amount of workload, and the only way to do this is to have a position that handles this, and this will be the community service officer in our investigations division. The next one are some of our budget highlights. I'm not going to go through all of these because many of them are just fees that we have to pay for things like radio connections and services that we use, but I do want to focus on two of them. The first one is the body camera program, which I know it's a big deal for the police department as well as it is for the council. And so we are proposing the addition of a body camera program for the police department. This will allow for every sworn officer, from myself all the way down to the newest officer, to have a body camera. And this program would begin in July. In fact, I believe it's the July 7th council meeting, if this continues through in the budget process, I'll be back in front of you and I'm going to explain the entire body camera program. We've been in a trial program for the last couple of months with the vendor that we're looking at using. And so if this continues through, I'll be back here in less than a month, and I'm going to tell you everything about the body camera program. But obviously, that's a large change for us. It's about $175,000 in our budget this year. Part of that is the contract with the company for the body cameras, and a little bit of it is some money because we don't know some of those other costs. Like, are we going to have enough batteries? Are we going to have enough of the clips that go on our vests? All those things that we just don't know. And so in total, it's about $175,000. And the other thing that's on there that I wanted to bring your attention to is the Unsheltered Plan Reunification Program. It's a small amount of money. It's $5,000 that's part of our social services unit. And what this program is meant for is for those individuals that social services encounters in the field that are homeless, that actually have family someplace else, and they have an ability to get off the street. They have a support system. It's just not here, and they have no way to get back to wherever that is. And so we've done this a little bit over the last year, where we've just found money in other places to help people get back to their support structures. Last fall, we had a gentleman that was homeless in our city who has family in Oregon. He has a sister that was willing to take him in and take care of him. They just had no way to get him from here to there, and we helped him get there. And so this would just put this money into our budget so that we can continue to do this. And so those are some of the highlights in there. That, like I said, the rest of these many of them are just increases in contracts we have, connection fees, and those kinds of things that are going up this year. And with that, if you have any questions about the police department budget, I'd be happy to ask them for you. Or answer them. You get to ask them.
Does council have any questions of our chief?
Just a comment. I'm glad to see that unification program. I knew a little bit about that, but I'm glad you elaborated. That's nice, given the homeless issues that we're starting to see, that we have that in place. And again, I'm so happy we're getting our body cameras. I'm glad that's in there and that we're able to get that done in this budget. So nice presentation. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
One question on ammunition. From what I've heard from friends that shoot a lot, they said the bullets are getting up to like 70, 80 cents a piece. I mean, is that you guys experience the same drastic increase, or do you guys have different resources than the public?
No, we pay the same thing everybody else does. We just get in line ahead of everybody else. Our increase in our ammunition budget is actually related to several years ago in the recession. We had to cut money someplace in our budget, just like everybody else did, and we had to cut our ammunition budget. We cut it by about $25,000, and this was back in 08, 09, somewhere in there. Since then, we've added a lot of staff. which increases our training and the amount of ammunition we need for training, and we've never increased the budget to go with it. So a little bit of it is things cost more, and a little bit of it is we found, like this year, we had to go back mid-year and ask for more money because we were starting to run out. And it's directly related to the amount of ammunition we need to train our officers.
And thank you. And I'm going to add on to that comment. I know our communities really push for the body-worn cameras, and the councils push for that. And what was really exciting is that the police push for that too. So I'm really excited about that program. I think that's just a win-win for everybody, and looking forward to seeing that implemented.
Anything? Okay. All right, that's all. Thank you very much. All right, next up we have our fire chief, Rick Partee.
You're up, buddy.
Oh, you know what? I got to open up public comments, all right?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll open this up for public comment. I have to remember that.
You can't leave yet.
Is there anyone here tonight that would like to address this item? Ask a question of our chief? And the call-in number is 916-774-5353. And we don't have any calls, so I'll close public comment. Thank you. Sorry about that, Chief. Good afternoon, good evening.
I was going to say the same to you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Rick Partee, the fire chief here for the city of Roseville. I'm going to talk about our budget a little bit. Go to the next slide. As you can see, as the police chief mentioned, our divisions are actually 5 divisions where all of our budget is contained within those divisions. We have fire administration, which is across the street where I work. We have fire and life safety. As you can see, we're fire inspections, plan review, public education, community engagement, and citywide preparedness is actually ran out of there by my fire marshal and division chief. And of course, we have fire operations where we do the fire and emergency medical services, our hazmat and technical rescue responses. And then support services for us is where our materials and supplies, facilities, and fleet needs are taken care of out of that group. Next slide. As Scott mentioned earlier, our operating budget is $37.6 million is proposed for this next year coming up here. As you can see, 80% of that fire's budget is in fire operations, where the 24/7 all-hazard response that we delivered by our employees is in that budget itself in operations. This is where the rubber meets the road in the protecting the community of Roseville. It's important to note that as listed in the budget book, you will find under that 19.65% of fire's budget expenditures are funded out of revenue offsets from funds such as CFDs, as mentioned earlier, and the half-cent sales tax and other funds that are part of that revenue. Next one. Talk about our budget highlights. Actually, it's a lot that I want to really thank Dennis and Scott and the budget team for working with fire to recognize the areas where our cost increases impact our budget, like materials and supplies, the rise in the cost of mandated health physicals for our workers for hazardous jobs that they do, and the utility cost rates that impact fire's budget in itself to cover those costs. But fire will always continue to seek and apply for grant opportunities to replace aging equipment and enhance training wherever possible. Also on that slide, you'll see there, we will see an increase in fire's revenue offsets for expenditures in FY 21-22 when the city begins to collect fees related to the cost of providing advanced life support, basic life support services, and other medical services that require immediate transportation to the hospital for both city residents and non-residents for the city, and for emergency medical services first responder fee. And actually, that's pretty much the part of my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. Does the council have any questions of?
I just had one question. I was just curious, as far as vendors, I mean, I know police and fire both have vendors, but as far as the ambulance services that we have, I know I've been reading some reports lately that other states are starting to see, cities, not states, are seeing increases in third-party ambulance services, and some of that is labor costs, some of that is vehicles and types of equipment that are on them. Are we within this budget, are we seeing the same thing, or did we see a larger increase over other cities of our size, or are we pretty much where we should be with those vendors?
You know, the ambulance service isn't a vendor of the city. The ambulance service is a vendor of the county, and the county has to contract with who they choose to provide ambulance service within the county itself. The citizens themselves, or those who use the ambulance service, are charged directly by them, by a rate set by the state, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Any other?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I like about our budget is it breaks down each one of the operating budgets and gives some real metrics associated with that. So on your budget on page B58, it talks about key workload measures and the number of fire incidents. Can you talk about the complexity of a fire incident? I mean, are there new materials? Are there more challenges now? You know, you go out to a single-family structure that was built in the 70s or 80s, but you go to a fire incident that was something, whether it's residential or commercial, built this century.
Right.
Can you, can
we
you
talked
put a
about,
little qualitative aspect to that?
Good question.
Those incidents?
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's a good question, because, when you came out for the Fire Ops 101, we were able to give you a presentation on how fires burn when they had real wood and real fabrics, as far as cotton goes and so forth, back in the 70s and 80s when I grew up and so forth, to what we have today, where there are plastics and other synthetic materials that burn a lot faster and a lot harder, and also produce a more toxic environment for the firefighters themselves. And so our ability to get there as fast as we can and with as many people as possible as we can is what keeps those fires small and keeps people safe. And also, I will have to give a plug to it, fire sprinklers, as far as sprinklers in homes here we have in the city that allow people to be able to get out of a fire. It doesn't really put the fire out, but allows people to be able to get out because they do burn so fast.
Yep. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions of our chief? Okay, I will open it up to public commenting. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to address this item? Or they may call in right now. The number is 916-774-5353. No one has called in, so I'll close public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll get through one more and then see how we are on taking a break. Okay.
Uh-oh, my favorite department.
We will hear from Parks and Recs and Libraries. You can't say that too loud.
I'm going to say I didn't hear what you said. What did you just say?
It was off the record.
Good afternoon, Mayor
Good
Bernasconi
afternoon.
and members of the council. I'm Jill Geller, your Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Director. It's my pleasure to be here today to present to you the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries fiscal year 22 budget. As you're aware, the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Department oversees all the city parks, its recreation programs and facilities, and its libraries. We currently manage 80 developed parks and nearly 4,000 acres of public space. Additionally, we maintain more than 300 acres of streetscapes and 40 acres of school properties. We also manage and maintain more than 30 facilities, which include our 3 libraries, 3 swimming pools, 2 golf courses, Roseville Sports Center, Maidu Community Center, Maidu Museum and Historic Site, and 19 Adventure Club sites. So you can see that quite a bit falls under this department's purview. Our operating expenditures budget, including the youth development in the enterprise fund and the golf operations in the special revenue fund, totaled $37.8 million. Parks, Recreation, and Libraries' general fund operating budget for FY22 is $27.4 million. And our services that fall within the general fund are administration, parks, recreation, libraries, and Maidu Museum. Some of our budget highlights this year include new positions for our department. Most of these fall within the Parks Division. So not to repeat what Dom shared with you, but I will to some extent. In the past 5 years, we've added 16 parks and more than 280 park and streetscape acres, while our parks staffing level has remained essentially flat, actually decreased by 1. These new parks, again, they feature 7 new ball fields, 3 new soccer fields, which require an even higher level of maintenance. So recognizing everything that we've added in the last 5 years, it's understandable that we can't maintain our parks and streetscapes at the level expected without additional staff. So on this slide, you see our request for a new parks supervisor and 3 parks maintenance workers to help maintain our existing service levels as a result of our growing park system. Additionally, we've requested 3 natural resource workers. Open Space has added 4 new trail miles since 2017, and additional trail miles will soon be added at Sierra Vista, Westbrook, Fitiment, Campus Oaks, Creekview, and Mahaney Open Space. You're well aware of the increased trail use we've seen in the past year, and we expect that this will continue. Increased use of our trails and open space requires increased attention to litter control, graffiti cleanup, vegetation management, and general safety inspection. One of these natural resource workers will focus in these areas, funded with dollars previously used for part-time staff. Using these funds to employ a full-time staff person will provide greater efficiencies, a higher level of staff expertise, and year-round reliability. 2 of these natural resource workers will focus on our unsheltered cleanup efforts. With a responsibility to be good stewards of our parks and open spaces, it's critical that we ensure they're properly cared for and well preserved for our residents today and for future generations. Understanding that unsheltered activities and debris can negatively affect our environment, as well as present safety concerns for the community, we will place an emphasis on our efforts in this area. We had previously contracted our unsheltered cleanup services, utilizing these same dollars for 2 new full-time staff, as well as dollars available in the Open Space Fund to bring this responsibility in-house, places these efforts as a priority year-round, and allows us to be more responsive to needs as they arise. The new PRL coordinator position will develop and implement new programs and events for our community. Much of the expense for this position is offset through the elimination of a temporary position. Providing these opportunities to our residents furthers your strategic priorities of maintaining a safe and healthy community and delivering exceptional city services. Added revenue will also be generated by this coordinator's efforts. And lastly, our marketing and communications analyst will help us both inform the public and respond to their inquiries. The Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Department is as engaged with our community as any city department, and we currently have just 1 full-time employee to meet our many demands. Informing the public through our new PRL magazine and our new monthly What's Happening in PRL video series, engaging the community in new park planning and playground replacements, and seeking feedback on our programs and services are only a few of the ways this department helps to foster community engagement and advocacy. I do want you to know that we've been very thoughtful in our new position requests, and as you've heard me mention, we are utilizing dollars previously budgeted for contracts and temporary staff, as well as dollars available in other funds, such as open space and CFDs for the staff who will work in those areas. The result is just a fraction of the funding for these positions is coming from the general fund. We do have some additional requests in the coming year as well. We will be implementing security improvements identified through a police department assessment of our PRL facilities. The safety of our staff and patrons is priority 1, and this project will include some minor facility modifications at our 3 libraries, the Sports Center, and Maidu Community Center, as well as improvements to card key access, security cameras, and signage. The library print services and mobile printing project will provide improved services to our library patrons. Additionally, implementation of this technology will increase our revenues and decrease our need for temporary staff, resulting in a return on this investment in year 2. Unsheltered camp cleanup funds allow us to better maintain the open space in the Secret Ravine area behind Sutter Hospital, which is an attractive area for unsheltered activity. Funds will be used for goat grazing in this area, as well as waste disposal fees and security fees for 2 large cleanups that will be scheduled in this area each year. Additional funding for parks will help us maintain our aging infrastructure, which includes playground resurfacing, lighting repairs and replacement, backstops, benches, water fountains, and so much more. Riego Creek Elementary School opened last year, and per our joint use agreement with the school district, it's our responsibility to maintain the turf at this school site, and this was a responsibility that was not previously budgeted, so you'll see that in this year's budget. And lastly, to prolong the life of the native and non-native tree funds, which are so important to maintaining our urban forest, we plan to gradually reduce the percent of the urban forester salary that's paid from these funds and transition it to the general fund over the next 3 years. Our annual expenditures that are required from these funds to maintain our urban forest continue to outpace the revenues. So this gradual offset of the urban forester salary will help extend the life of these funds. Our FY22 budget directly aligns with the Council's strategic priorities, and I'd like to go through them one by one and just touch on a few of the things that we do to support your priorities. To remain fiscally responsible in a changing world, we are aligning funds for improved services and increased efficiencies, as I mentioned we're doing with our new positions. We're creating new revenue-producing programs, improving our communications to increase our program participations and revenues, and we continue to evaluate our fees. To support community engagement and advocacy, we will engage residents through our enhanced communications. We communicate widely through e-newsletters, website, and social media. We conduct public workshops, both virtual and in person, to inform and engage our residents, businesses, and public agencies on our pending projects. And we've recently encouraged our residents' engagement through a community cleanup effort at Lincoln Estates Park with great response. This is an initiative we plan to continue at other locations in the coming year. As it relates to parks, recreation, and libraries, I truly believe that everything we do makes a healthier you. We provide opportunities for residents to live healthy lifestyles. It's a fact that parks, library services, and recreational opportunities contribute to our residents' physical, mental, emotional, and intellectual health. Our stewardship of parks and open spaces improves the environment. I can't think of a single thing our department does that doesn't contribute to our community's health. And we're excited to be rolling out a citywide wellness initiative that you'll be hearing more about in the coming months. Also, providing opportunities and places for people to spend their leisure time creates a safer community. To enhance economic vitality, we've enlisted a consultant to assist our department with a long-range strategic master plan, which also includes a sports tourism plan. We know that sports draw people to our community, and to this end, we're excited to construct a new sports complex to serve our residents as well as draw regional participation. Parks increase home values, improve air and water quality, attract talented workers and new residents to Roseville, and much more to support our economy. We also continue to develop new parks and maintain our existing parks, all of which affect our economy. In our effort to deliver exceptional city services, we will go live in August with our new ActiveNet recreation management software to improve customer service. We plan to optimize our use of technology and data to improve our operations in all areas, such as childcare management, enhancing our wireless at our Adventure Club sites, GIS-based programs, and our asset inventories. And we continue to evaluate our department organization to assure the alignment of our resources provides for the highest level of efficiency and effectiveness to help us deliver exceptional city services. To address your priority in investing in well-planned infrastructure and growth, we do continue to invest in our aging infrastructure, playgrounds, park amenities, fencing, monuments, benches, and so on. We also continue to develop new parks in growth areas of the city. Our management of open space and preserve areas and our investment into the maintenance of new and aging streetscapes are additional ways we work towards this goal. So in closing, I've always felt that parks, recreation, and libraries are essential services, but during the pandemic, this became even more evident. We learned how critical our services are for people's health and wellness. They reduce anxiety, stress, and depression, and improve physical health. Where did people flock to during the pandemic? To our parks and trails. Outdoor spaces continue to be an essential part of how we cope and recover from this crisis, as well as physical activity and social interaction, all of which our services provide. In a nutshell, parks make life better. I know you feel the same, and I and our entire department always thank you for your continued support of our efforts. At this time, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. Does the council have any questions or comments of Jill? We'll start with Pauline.
I find you very amazing, and I totally agree about, especially this time that we're getting over the pandemic, that you're probably a lifesaver for many people. You just gave them another opportunity to be out there, and especially when everything else was kind of crumbling around them. And even for people, things were going good, it was still hard for them to cope, so I'm happy about that. I look forward to a lot of the additional enhancements you're doing, especially when we're having more parks and more trails. That means we need more people to make sure that they're staying intact and they're out there. So I'm excited with all the departments, but with Park and Rec and libraries, I think you kind of put everything, kind of cement everything together in a difficult time for us. So thank you.
You did a wonderful job emphasizing the importance and what we offer through our Parks Department here as a city. And every time I review something from your department, it's like the pictures, and I guess I gotta give credit to our AV team as well, but I mean, it makes me wish my kids were younger because, I mean, some of these play structures and the newer parks that have come online and the way that we have put them together, it's so cool. You know, I just, I think it's such a beautification. Not that our parks weren't before, but some of these newer play structures and the way that we've designed some of the amenities at these parks is just phenomenal. And, you know, I hope that the people who have, you know, younger children and even older children at some of our parks that have, you know, the volleyball courts and the sand courts and things like that can utilize them. But I'm always just so excited when I see these new parks and some of the things they're doing with the equipment. It's really exciting to see, and it's nice to have somebody energized like yourself who believes in our mission up here and what we are trying to strive for as a community, and that comes out in the parks and how we design them and how they're maintained. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Go first.
You're good?
Over to you. Yeah.
Well, Tracy, there's a park right by Councilman Alvord that you can actually work out in. What is the name of that park? Right next to Orchard Ranch?
There's a couple, the Rakuchi Park and the Sierra Crossing.
Sierra Crossing. There's like a workout. You can work out in that park. So I think you need a...
He's just saying they're not for kids.
What's that?
Are you trying to tell me something?
You're an example that I'm trying to follow. Anyway,
It's for
They're
kids.
just not for
right?
kids.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just giving them a hard time.
a picture of us all sliding down a slide. You know, I think next to schools, parks and trails are something that has attracted a lot of families to Roseville. So it's amazing what continues to be done here in the city of Roseville. And I love the new, is that a new tagline you were showing us? Everything we do leads to a healthier you.
It can be.
Somebody brilliant came up with that. You know, there's only I think maybe one benefit to the incredibly dry year we're having, and that is there's probably more rounds of golf being played. I was trying to read in our budget packet, are we, you know, a few years ago when the CPAC was deliberating, the golf fund was at issue. Is it getting healthier, or are we about ready to?
Golf is getting healthier. You're right, that's one thing that has increased in
only
popularity
thing.
throughout the pandemic. We've typically had about 90,000 rounds played at our 2 golf courses, and we're on pace to be at about 106,000 rounds.
That helps us with our golf fund, okay, because that used to be an issue. And, you know, it struck me, you've got 116, maybe 125 full-time employees and 700 part-time employees. You're probably the biggest department in the city, aren't you?
That's how you measure it.
No.
And so what I found valuable about your presentation is when the CPAC met, it asked, and I'm going to ask this question at the end of the evening as well, to look for efficiencies, service models that create efficiencies. And from your presentation, it looked like, you know, you may have found some during COVID, an unintended consequence of creating that as a result of that. And so we don't have a contract anymore with Clean Harbors. We're bringing that in-house.
That's correct.
So we can be more nimble.
That's
and
correct.
more responsive. Okay.
That's correct.
That's great. And let Tara know the grass is turning green at Harry Crab Park.
Good. And the spray feature was hugely popular over Memorial Day weekend.
I knew I meant to do something else over
Scott?
the weekend.
On the tree propagation, that is planting of new trees?
It includes that, and it includes the planting of new trees and the maintenance of our urban forest.
I know on the western side of town, we've got a lot of beautiful new trails that are no shelter whatsoever in areas out there. Just we'd love to get some trees planted along them. So a future generation can enjoy them even more. I wanted to make a couple comments when council interfaces with the public, and there's a lot of opportunities to talk about the wonderful things our city does. And I tell you, every time I mention we've got around 80 parks in the city, people are often shocked by that. I think that's just a fantastic story to keep on telling. I think that's impressive. And man, we have some serious goat tracker fanatics. It is hilarious how many families track those goats and go check them out. And I've driven by many times and just watched all these families along the fence, just really enjoying that. I think that's a fun thing. And then just another comment, the sports tourism that you mentioned, that's really important for our city as far as our economy goes, to get teams to come in and have softball tournaments. And we've got a new field system coming in a few years here. I think that idea of just having them in our hotels, having them shop in our stores, and enjoy the amenities of the city while building up our own economy from outside dollars, that's a great benefit to our city. And I'm just really appreciative that our city keeps thinking about that, because our economy is really important as we go down the road and our growth slows down and eventually stops. We just really want to have a really strong economy. And so I'm glad we're looking forward to that. So thank you for your presentation.
Okay, I will open it up for public comment, and we'll take phone calls now. And if there's anyone here tonight that would like to address this item, they can come forward or call in to 916-774-5353. I don't think we're going to have anyone call in, but we appreciate your presentation, and you are an excellent ambassador for your department, too.
Thank you.
Okay. We want to keep going, or we want to break? Want to hear one more? Everyone okay?
How many more do we?
Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so we will hear from Development Services next.
I think I can safely say good evening, Mayor and council members.
Good evening.
Mike Isom, your Development Services Director. I'm pleased to present Development Services fiscal 22 budget. We have, just by way of background of what our department does and our primary functions, we have 4 primary operating divisions, but we're budgeted in 6 different divisions. If we can get to the next slide, please. Thank you. We have 6 divisions. Current head count's 82. As I sit here today, if this budget gets approved, we'll talk about this in another slide, we'll be up to 84. The administration obviously provides general oversight of the department, personnel and budget management. Our Business and Administrative Services Division, they provide administrative support internally to the internal divisions within Development Services. They also manage the citywide addressing database and land-based data. So the addressing data is relied on by our CAD system for 911 dispatch and things like that. They manage the city's development records, cell automation, which is our enterprise permitting system. And most importantly, they manage our invoicing and development services revenue collection. Building inspection in the permit center, they are responsible for building plan review and inspection. Anything that goes vertical that requires a permit goes through that shop, both for plan review and inspection. We have the front counter operations at the permit center. That's the front-facing, forward-facing customer interface. And then we have back-of-house support for the permit center and the building division. Code enforcement is responsible for community-wide nuisance abatement and sign enforcement. Our engineering land development folks are responsible for reviewing infrastructure improvement plans. So as opposed to building that looks at vertical construction, engineering's looking at all utilities, roadways, anything topside that goes on or under the ground is what engineering's looking at. Water and sewer infrastructure and things like that. Planning oversees the city's land use planning and general plan. They process development entitlements, and they also participate in regional planning efforts with SACOG and other regional partners. For fiscal year 22, our total net operating expenditure budget is $10.3 million, and this $10.3 million number already includes $3.1 million in staff reimbursement for full cost development projects and other internal labor reimbursements. So in actuality, our operating budget is actually higher, but this number already reflects those salary offsets. And that's just done for accounting reasons. It's shown as a salary offset rather than revenue. It just reduces the expense side of the ledger category, or the ledger accordingly, excuse me. That 10.3 number is further offset by another $5.9 million in permit fee revenue. So in reality, we're bringing in about $9 million a year in development-related revenue. So our net impact of the general fund is roughly $4.4 million. So that just is a direct reflection of the current development activity. The remainder of that general fund portion is reflected in services that we generally can't recover costs from. It's primarily code enforcement, activities at the counter like general inquiries, zoning questions, things like that we don't charge for, we shouldn't charge for, and other general government functions. With respect to budget highlights, really, for the most part, we're status quo from last year with two notable exceptions. Consistent with the council's strategic priorities and unsheltered strategies, we're recommending to add one full-time code enforcement inspector and a 1,500-hour temporary code enforcement inspector. These new positions would report directly to Development Services, but our plan is to embed them in the Police Department Social Services unit, and they would help with the blight and nuisance issues associated with our unsheltered residents. And a big part of that is just, the process of tracking down property owners, doing the paperwork, the administrative type things that make more sense for a code enforcement inspector to do, and it frees up sworn officers' time to focus on other pressing matters. So this is entirely a general government function. There's no revenue offset, so it's 100% hit to the general fund. We're proposing to add one additional analyst in our Business and Administrative Services division, and this position is recommended to maintain service levels as the city grows. And this position is essential to support the various technology platforms that I've spoken to you about a couple times throughout the year that we use to deliver services to residents and the development community. And these are things like electronic permitting and plan review, fee and revenue collection, and development activity reporting. So whereas before we needed more people on the front side at the permit center taking in the physical plans, now that business model is shifting where we need more support on the back end to help with the electronic side of the house. We have a 1,500-hour temp that's currently allocated to that division for this purpose. That position vacated about a year ago. We've made several attempts to fill it. It has a very specific skill set, a technology-focused skill set, and not surprisingly, we can't find anybody interested in taking a temporary position, unbenefited temporary position. So we'd like to try something different. It is factored in our overall cost recovery program, and we're proposing to eliminate two existing temporary positions in order to help pay for that. So the net cost is fairly minimal. And even though we're adding positions, we're proposing no increases to our material supplies and services budget this year. Based on the efficiencies, again, that I've spoken about throughout the year, we're able to do what we need to do with what we have available to us. So no increases there. And I didn't mention this earlier, but we're actually increasing our revenue estimates this year. Typically, we keep our revenue estimates fairly constant just for conservative budget estimating, but given the sustained increase in development activity, next year we're projecting a 13% increase in our revenue over the current fiscal year. In actuality, it's going to come in probably higher than that. We always budget lower than what we typically see come in, but again, that's just so we can maintain our staffing levels in case development activity takes an unexpected turn. So with that is the Development Services Department's budget for next fiscal year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does the council have any questions of Mike?
Sounds good. Thank you.
How you doing it all?
We have really good people that are highly motivated.
Yes, and that's the answer.
Yeah, great news on the code enforcement position, too.
Yeah.
Okay, I will open it up to public comment. If there's anyone here tonight that would like to comment on this item, now is the time to do so. You can come to the podium or call in. The number is 774-5353. Okay, I'll close public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, do we want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, thank you. We will continue on in our budget workshop, and we will be hearing from Stephanie Keeman, who is filling in for Jason Tchaikovsky of our Public Works Director. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. My name is Stephanie Keeman. I'm the Public Works Department Engineering Division Manager, filling in, as the mayor just said, this evening for our director, Jason Tchaikovsky, to provide you with an overview of the services provided by your Public Works Department and the proposed fiscal year 22 budget that will help fund those services. Public Works is comprised of 6 divisions. The Administration Division provides general department oversight of 117 full-time staff, creates and monitors the department budget, is the face of the department for interactions with the council and Transportation Commission, fosters regional partnerships, and spearheads public outreach. Fleet Services oversees vehicle equipment maintenance, vehicle and equipment purchasing, managing the pool and rental vehicles, and management of the fueling stations. For engineering, the key services include management and construction of transportation infrastructure, traffic operations and intelligent transportation systems, traffic studies, traffic signal maintenance, floodplain management, and the city's flood alert system. Street maintenance provides pavement and sidewalk maintenance, weed abatement, traffic sign installation and maintenance, roadway striping and marking installation, drainage system maintenance, street sweeping, oversized load permits, special event traffic control, graffiti removal, and on-call staff 24/7 for emergencies, including assisting the fire and police departments. The Alternative Transportation Division includes Roseville Transit and our regional call center, managing and maintaining and constructing bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and encouraging non-single occupancy vehicle transportation. And finally, Facility Services takes care of building and parking garage construction, repair and maintenance, custodial services, managing and leasing city property, facility security, facility ADA compliance, general fund capital improvement projects, and fixed asset rehabilitation. The Public Works operating budget totals $43.3 million. Of that, only about 20%, or about $8.7 million, comes directly from the general fund, and the other 80% from various other funding sources, including the Automotive Services and Facility Maintenance Funds, Transportation Development Act funds, and Highway User Tax, or gas tax, among others. The pie chart on your screen shows the percentage split of the total operating budget expenses by division for each of the divisions within the department, and all of the divisions are funded in part by one of the sources I just mentioned. For fiscal year 22, Public Works is presenting the following budget highlights. This coming year, Public Works staff is re-examining the city's transit system, exploring new routes and services, and researching new ways to increase transit ridership in an effort to optimize transit operations. 2 of the tools we plan to use to help with this process is an update to the city's short-range transit plan and testing a pilot project involving microtransit. Microtransit is a form of demand-responsive transportation similar to Uber Pool. Riders use an app or make a telephone call to request a ride. A city-owned or contracted vehicle will then be assigned to pick up the rider. The rider will be notified of the estimated pickup time, delivery time, and cost, and the cost of the shared ride will be split between the few riders picked up en route to similar destinations and subsidized by Roseville Transit to make it affordable. We are in the early phases of developing the pilot project, and more information will be made available through public meetings and outreach as the pilot project evolves, and these tools will utilize existing staff resources. Next up, as a part of the recent Washington-Andorra Phase 1 Active Transportation Grant Award, Roseville received $160,000 for the Safe Routes to Schools program. The grant award includes funds for a new part-time temporary college intern to help with the program outreach and training. This grant-funded part-time temporary position has been included in the fiscal year 22 budget request. A common theme of my presentation of the following budget highlights tonight will be the growth in Roseville over the past decade and the impact that has had on our staff resources. The following highlights include a request for the equivalent of 5.25 FTE, all of which will provide a clear benefit to the city. Over the past decade, the miles of Roseville streets and the city population has grown by approximately 25%. This has led to more assets to track in GIS, a greater need to share information with the public proactively rather than reactively, and more data analysis to improve efficiency. Public Works staff is proposing an increase of our existing GIS technician from half-time to full-time in the fiscal year 22 budget to ensure we maintain service levels in our growing city. That notable growth in Roseville over the past decade, combined with the inherent aging of our infrastructure, has also led to a large increase in maintenance projects, traffic study requests, and the urgent need to construct many of our planned CIPs. To meet these demands, an additional full-time engineer is included in the proposed Public Works budget. Historically, vertical construction of city buildings and parking garages were managed by Facility Services. Due to staff retirements within the Facility Services Division, this function was transferred to the Engineering Division several years ago. However, engineering's expertise is primarily in transportation projects and transportation maintenance, and there are an increasing number of urgent transportation and maintenance projects in the queue, so this is no longer the best use of city resources. Returning vertical construction to Facility Services will actually benefit 3 divisions and help them all meet their work demands. Facility project workload alone has more than doubled over the past 4 years, with approximately 88 projects currently split between 2 project coordinators. Engineering has a long list of priority improvements and deferred maintenance that must be addressed, and the Streets Maintenance Division needs project coordination assistance to hire contractors to complete smaller maintenance projects such as guardrail and small storm drain repairs that they cannot complete in-house without hiring more staff. We have included in the fiscal year 22 budget a request for a new project supervisor needed to make this change. These 2 requests are needed to ensure that we can maintain service levels in this growing city. The Fleet Services Division sees an additional 5 to 10 vehicles added to their list of managed and maintained equipment every year, also as a result of the city's growth. This has led to a necessary increase in maintenance staff over the years without any increase in management staff to oversee them. Compounding this challenge for fleet services are emerging regulations surrounding zero emissions vehicles that is going to require considerable planning, analysis, and reporting that existing staff do not have the capacity to address. To meet these challenges, ensuring we can maintain service levels and adequately address zero emission mandates in the future, Public Works is proposing the addition of a fleet analyst for fiscal year 22 to oversee new regulations and bring the span of control back down to appropriate levels. The increased miles of streets and number of residents' concerns to address has resulted in the proportionate increase in work orders to process, invoices to bill, assets to track, and paperwork to manage for the Streets Maintenance Division. Facility-related work orders, contract services, invoices, and projects have also increased within the city. Facility services have not only seen the project workload double over the past 4 years, as previously mentioned, but the number of square feet maintained has increased by 15%. Existing support resources within these 2 divisions are unable to keep up with the growing backlog. Public Works fiscal year 22 budget requests include the conversion of 2 part-time temporary office assistants in these 2 divisions to full-time office assistants in order to ensure we can maintain services. And finally, we are proposing a 1/4 time increase for an existing permanent community relations analyst position to help with the state-mandated transportation management planning efforts promoting transit, biking, walking, rideshare, and remote work to reduce congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. The increased cost of this position is offset by a temporary position that was recently vacated. And this concludes my presentation this evening, and I, along with my colleagues, the managers of the department's other divisions, are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Does the council have any questions of Stephanie?
I just had one, Stephanie. Nice to meet you. So it was nice to have you here. You were saying that you do graffiti abatement, right? Graffiti. So then you work close with code enforcement, or if they get the notice, or that kind of thing.
I believe code enforcement will operate in private development areas as far as asking private developers to handle graffiti on theirs, whereas our streets maintenance staff handle graffiti within right-of-way or public facilities.
Okay. And I think it's interesting that microtransit pilot, see how that turns out, because there's a lot of times people do like dial-a-ride, so it's kind of like a dial-a-ride Uber.
Yes.
So, okay, nice to hear the things that are happening.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Any other comments or questions for Stephanie?
Yeah, if Parks and Rec is the heart, Public Works is the backbone of the city. It's obvious from your presentation and everything. I mean, the support we get for our Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, our Public Works and our fleet management. You are the backbone of the city.
Thank you.
I was trying to find a figure because I thought would be pretty impressive, and I could not find the actual figure. So we got 8,000 work orders. We're adding 5 to 10 vehicles a year. What's the total number of vehicles roughly that we have. I thought I would stump Jason with that, but
Well, refer to our fleet manager.
or even
who's
a
here.
guesstimate. I'm just
There you go.
curious.
Yeah, you can.
With a
certainly.
crew.
Good evening. I'm Brian Craighead, Fleet Manager for the city. To answer your question, a little over 900. We're about 908 right now.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions from the council, I will open it up to public comment. And this is now the time for anyone to come to the podium that has any questions on this item, or people can call in to 916-774-5353 for public comment. I don't think anyone's going to call in, so I'll close public comment. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Great job.
Excellent presentation.
Okay, next up we have our electric utility director, Michelle Bertolino, for a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi, council members. I'm Michelle Bertolino, and I'm here tonight to provide you with a high-level overview of our proposed electric department budget for fiscal 21-22. So we have 3 divisions within the electric utility. Our resources and generation division, which provides all the electricity and gas and generates electricity and buys electricity and gas to deliver to our Roseville residents and businesses. Also manages our AMI, our Advanced Meter Upgrade Project. Our engineering and operations division actually delivers all of the electricity to all the residents and businesses, and also maintains all of the infrastructure throughout the city, as well as they oversee all of our risk and compliance requirements, which are growing every day. And then our third division is our customer and government relations division. That's our external facing division. Our utility billing groups there. We work with all of our business, especially our key accounts. We also work in partnership with the city's economic development department. A lot of our work right now is in economic development, communications and marketing, finance, our budgeting. We work with Dennis and his awesome staff, who, I'll just give a little plug, make the budget process much, much easier. So thank you both very much. We really appreciate it. And also our legislative and regulatory folks. And then also our public benefits programs for energy efficiency and all of the things we do to get people to use less of what we sell them. So our operating budget is different than most every other department in that half of our budget is buying and selling and generating electricity. So that's a big chunk of our budget. We have almost $170 million budget, 167.4. Half of that is electricity, gas, and all it takes to generate that, and all the people behind that to buy and sell that 24/7, 365 days a year. The rest of the 50% of the budget is divided up into many small parts. We have debt service. We've issued bonds in the past to build the power plant, as well as to build some of our distribution system. Our government relations staff, our distribution system, which delivers all the electricity and maintains the infrastructure. I'll also highlight the franchise fee. We pay an in lieu franchise fee that I believe Dennis mentioned earlier that funds police, fire, parks, and libraries. It's about $6.5 million for next year. We also provide, we receive services from all the city's shared services departments. We also have a very robust capital and rehabilitation program. So budget highlights for us, and I talked about this a few weeks ago or a month ago when I did the budget presentation, so I won't go to this in depth unless you'd like to talk about it in depth. But we prioritize funding of essential services. That's what we do. We look at ourselves as an essential service provider, also emergency responders at times. We also focus heavily on compliance with all of our regulatory requirements, as well as our financial policies and all of our metrics. We run like a business, which is a little bit different from some of the other departments also. We have substantial investment in infrastructure and technology. The budget before you tonight assumes no rate increase in it. We will be coming to you later this summer with a budget increase proposal to take effect next year. We haven't had a base rate increase for over 7 years, so that's something that we talk about a lot and we brag about because we've done a very good job of managing our finances through some very difficult times over the last 7 years. Dennis mentioned the integration of utility billing. That is pretty much done. It has been Dennis showed a very large decrease in his budget, but it didn't change our budget because actually EU and electric share these costs and have for many, many years. So it's just, there's no, it just was a transfer out of our department into his. But we have completed that. The exciting news is that by the end of the year, and if Jason was here, he'd be laughing at me. We are going to be moving utility billing as well as our customer solutions and customer-facing group to the new building at 116 South Grant Street. So we're very excited about that. It'll be a one-stop shop for customers and businesses to come in, learn more about us, pay their bills, get information. It also will create a downtown presence for the electric utility. So we're very excited about that. And Jason's team and Stephanie are helping us with that because they maintain all the city facilities. We're proposing 5 new positions for this budget. And we historically, over the last 5 years, haven't added many positions, but we are starting to feel the pressure of all of the new regulatory mandates and requirements. So 2 of the positions we're requesting are in response to that for all of the new regulations we have to comply with and making sure that we are complying with those, because in our business, if we don't, we have hefty financial fines and other things, bad things that can happen. So 2 of the positions are for that. The other 3 positions are really just to maintain existing service levels, 2 in our utility billing group, and then 1 at the power plant for a planner scheduler to help plan the rehabilitation and the maintenance that needs to happen out at the power plants. So lastly, everything we do aligns with all of the council's goals. Here we just list a few of those. And so to remain fiscally responsible in a changing world, we are going to be proposing the rate case. We support new development. Development pays its way with our infrastructure, but it's a substantial part of what we do. We also are looking at new and diverse revenue streams with electrification of buildings and vehicles. And you hear a lot about electrification and various folks that are looking to eliminate natural gas down the road. And so that's going to put much more demand on our system for electricity. We're also seeing quite an uptick in our customers and visitors' desire for electric vehicles. So we need to make sure we have the infrastructure here in town to do that. We also support the council's goal for well-planned infrastructure and growth with our meter upgrade project that I mentioned earlier. We are currently remodeling and upgrading our dispatch center down at the Corporate off of Hilltop. Everything's torn up. We can't even get into the front door right now, but it's going to bring us into this century. We had a very manual system with our map of our system was on paper on this huge wall with little thumbtacks in it, believe it or not. But we're actually upgrading that to have it be technology-based. And then I mentioned the building across the street, 116 South Grant. We're referring that to as the Legacy Building. And then we're upgrading the Roseville Energy Park security and aesthetics. We're going to be doing landscaping, and if you've been out there lately, there's a lack of landscaping around the energy park, and that was intentional until there was certain infill or certain things built out there. So we are going to be installing landscaping and some aesthetics improvements as well as some security improvements. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Okay. Does the council have any questions of Michelle? I'll start with Councilmember Alvord.
You betcha. As a regular viewer of your energy park, I do appreciate the technology, but I think that would be kind of cool if it wasn't as visible out there. I was curious on the advanced metering AMI. What was the I for again?
Infrastructure. It's advanced metering infrastructure.
How's that going? We've been hearing about that for years. I know that's a challenge in the older neighborhoods and stuff, but where are we at with that?
It's we are scheduled to start rolling some out in a test pilot later this year, if not early next year. We've had significant delays with the project for many, many reasons. Some of it has to do with the vendor who wasn't able to deliver on some of the things we needed. Part of it has to do with we have to interface with so many different systems within the city, and some of them are citywide systems, and so it's challenging. We're a very, very complex city, and so it was much more complicated than we thought. But we are now on track, and we will start seeing some of those roll out within the next 12 months.
Great. And that's just the older areas, the newer homes are coming online?
No, it's the whole city.
It's for everybody?
The whole city, yeah.
Okay.
The newer homes have newer meters, but we're going to be touching every home and business.
Okay. And then I want to mention I was at a restaurant today, had a meeting this morning, and the owner of the restaurant was mentioning how they can't wait until your building is occupied because they need more traffic downtown. And so this person, I have to say, we're holding on, waiting for this extra, for the other business that sold down on the 200 block, the big building and your building, and they're just hoping to get more people on the streets. And so I know the community is excited to have more people out here.
We are very excited also.
And then you had a comment that I just think is so interesting. The more electricity that gets used by residents and big businesses, the cheaper it is because you can get volume discounts when you purchase, when you're not making it yourself. Yet you have to get us to use less. So it just seems like such an awkward situation. And I don't know what to say about that. It's just a really weird industry, I guess, that, the more that gets used, the cheaper it gets, but please don't use more.
I think Rich is in the same boat as we are with the other utilities. But yeah, we have a state requirement that we get our customers to use less electricity on a per capita basis every year, and every year it gets to be more and more. So we set aside money for that. So yeah, it is, we work within it, and we still have done a very good job of keeping prices low and reliable power flowing in Roseville.
And that's fantastic. And people that are moving here from outside, that's another thing they keep hearing about, the power, the electric rates. All of our utilities are just so low, and we're really excited that you guys are functioning so well because it does make our city look really good, and we're all residents here paying the same bills, and it's nice to have low bills compared to our neighbors not too far away.
It's also good to have power on.
Yes, and power on.
So the government affairs and regulatory positions, is that for cybersecurity and physical security regulations, or?
It's for everything.
To keep the grid safe, right?
It is partly for physical security. It's partly for cybersecurity. It's for the regulatory piece. It's not the nuts and bolts on the technical side, right, because we have that along with the city's IT department. But it is just, as you know, when the legislation gets introduced and passed, and then it goes on to the regulators, and we have been playing a very big part, along with our partners, such as NCPA, to help the regulator staff understand our issues. So one example is wildfire. We now have a requirement to have a wildfire mitigation plan, and we've been working very closely for the last couple of years with the staff that are helping support that at the state, so they understand our specific needs, because we're small compared to, say, PG&E or Southern California Edison, and they have a different business model than we do, and we don't have the same exposure and the same risks, and so they have to understand that and write the regulations in a way that it's not horribly difficult for us to comply. So that's what it is. We need somebody that can work with the regulatory staff. We don't really have a person that does that right now. We have somebody that splits our time between legislative and regulatory.
Yeah, I know Tracy and I get presentations on law and reg from Amber, so I was trying to.
Yeah, so it's Amber's job will stay. That's an L&R piece, but it's really the technical side of things.
Okay, I had another question, but I forgot it.
Okay.
Bruce covered mine. I was just curious if this was going to replace Amber's position or if she was going to stay.
It's in addition to, which is good and bad. It's bad that we need to add another position for regulatory compliance, but it is becoming more and more of what we do.
That space daily, you can never have too much coverage.
Right, correct.
We have to add people, so.
It's a great investment.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we've been really fortunate in Roseville that our electricity has been done well, and we have a diversified portfolio, but we're working in a different world and trying to make sure that we keep our electricity on for our community and help our neighboring communities, but understanding that we are in a different kind of legislative world, and why we need extra people just to explain what do we look like outside of making regulations.
Yeah. Well, somebody asked me recently what's one of the biggest changes I've seen since I've been director, and one of the items is probably the biggest item is the regulatory requirements and changes and legislative changes, and the focus and every one of my staff, a part of their job has to do with regulatory compliance. And it wasn't always like that way, or I wasn't always that
Even
way.
being on council in the past compared to now, we had regulations that came up, but it wasn't as fast. And you're looking at one and talking about what date it's due, and then all of a sudden you get a new date, and it's like being on a treadmill.
Yeah. Well, then they change it.
And then they change it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, so your paper map?
Yes.
Will
We're
that-
upgrading.
Will that have a place of honor across the street? I mean,
It's too big. It's too big.
Is it too big?
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad. Actually,
I know.
I was hoping, right?
We'll take a
because
picture
it's a
of it.
legacy building, and
Yeah, there's a plan to put up some history and pictures
Okay.
of the utilities.
Great.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I will open up to public comment. If there's anyone here tonight that would like to address this item, or folks can call in. The phone number for public comment is 916-774-5353. And I don't think we're going to have anyone that's going to call in on public comment or speak to this item. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
Michelle. Okay. We have Mr. Plucker from our environmental utilities. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. I'm Rich Plecker. I'm your environmental utilities director. And if it seems like this is about the third time I've given this presentation in the
Seems
last
like it was just
month or
last week.
so, blame Dennis. But in light of that, I don't know whether he's trying to punish you or me by making me go last here, but I'll try to go easy on you. A couple things about EU, the divisions. We have a number of different divisions, 3 big ones really, but there's a number of functions we have. Administration, that obviously includes me and our finance staff. Utility services is a group that you're probably not aware of, but they're engineers, project managers, GIS people that operate in a shared function across all the utilities. So they operate in that fashion so that each one of the operating utilities doesn't have to replicate those staffs time and time again. So they operate across the entire domain. Then we have sort of the traditional divisions that you're aware of: water, wastewater. And wastewater includes also recycled water and the South Placer Wastewater Authority, SPWA, our other partners in the treatment plants. And then waste services, or solid waste. That also includes a group in stormwater that handles compliance. It's a long story of how it kind of got to be there, but one of the things in the stormwater regulations is it's called the trash rule. And since this is the sort of the city's trash department, it aligns from a regulatory space standpoint very well with that utility. So that's why that works. And then lastly, we have the Utility Exploration Center, which we co-own and manage with Roseville Electric. We just happen to be the department that houses the staff, but it's co-managed on both sides, much like utility billing is. So the next slide. Talk about the operating expenditures budget. EU's total budget this going year is almost $117 million. That places us amongst the rather large departments. It's split almost equally, and then I say almost. Wastewater is our largest division, comprising 40% of the expenditures. Water is next at 31%, waste services at 29%. In round terms, that's a $40 million, $35 million, and $30 million a year business. So it gives you sort of a sense of the size of EU. We didn't break down different types of expenditures where we're basically split equally between labor and then external costs, things like purchased water, chemicals, things of that nature, although the preponderance of our costs are labor-based. On the next slide, talk about some of our budget highlights, unfunded mandates. Again, you've heard this before. The big push this year in solid waste utility is organics and recycling, the amount of money that we're spending to adhere to that set of regulations. Also, water efficiency standards that we're dealing with actually from 2018. Those regulations continue to get promulgated, and in fact, there have been some proposed changes to it this year, which ratchet down sort of the water use numbers even further. ELAP, which I believe is Bruce's favorite regulation, which means basically we have to hire a quality control person to quality control check the quality control check in the laboratories. It's kind of ridiculous, and it costs us extra money and doesn't add a lot of value. So not that that's my personal opinion, but that is my personal opinion. Lastly, we have salt control, which is another stroke of brilliance because the state of California struggles at times with groundwater and salt intrusion in groundwater, primarily related to agricultural use. The city does have groundwater resources, but we don't introduce salt, nor is our aquifer system salty. But most water providers in the state are joining in on this salt control plan amendment, even though we're not contributory towards that effort. So again, it doesn't cost that much compared to what it really does in terms of benefit, but it's another example of regulations and legislation that we get to pay for. Next slide. Talk a little bit about our required or requested staffing changes. Again, I think you've seen most of this. In water, we're asking for a management analyst. This is actually related to regulations and growth, both, mainly due to our ASR program. Our ASR permit contains provisions in it that the more you use it, the more you have to report on it. There's a mind-boggling amount of data that needs to go back and forth between the state and ourselves when we're using our ASR wells, so that's what this position is going to do. On the wastewater side of things, we're making some in-house changes with an admin technician, and then a couple of instrument and controls technician and a utility maintenance worker. Those positions are really related to growth. The facilities are just getting larger. The processors are more complicated. They're not new types of positions. They're just additional bodies to do the work that we already do. So I would call that as a sort of a growth position. Waste services, these are brand new positions related to dealing with the organics rule that I spoke of earlier. This relates to shifting our green waste service to every week as opposed to every other week as it is now. That's so that we can co-collect green waste and household organics at the same time. This relates to 7 new refuse truck driver positions, another supervisor, and another compliance administrator. Again, these are all directly attributable to changes in state law and in implementing regulations that Michelle spoke to. Because there's 2 elements. There's the law that's passed, and then there's the regulations that are written by the regulators. So count them right there. There's 9 new people coming to the utility, as I affectionately say, to make sure that we don't put any more banana peels in the landfill. Lastly, business services, we're proposing to add a data management specialist. Again, others have mentioned it before, but we're heavily reliant on our data systems. Data management folks, again, they pull the information from these systems so that we can report it to the state in large portion for a total of 13 new positions. I've never requested this many positions before. I hope we don't ever do it again, but faced with what we're dealing with on the greenway side of things, we have but no alternative. So on the next slide, talk a little bit about the council strategic plan. Again, I think like all other departments, everything we do is in alignment with your strategic plan and adds value to the community, especially as it relates to remaining fiscally responsible in the changing world. We're very tuned into the competitive rates. We've just completed a rate case for this last year. Those rates will be going into effect in July. And those reflect really our needs to keep revenues at a place where they're matching our expenditures while we make the needed investments in infrastructure and all the other things that we need to make along the way. We maintain a safe and healthy community. Almost everything that we do in EU is related to sanitation. We're in the business of cleaning water. We either take it out of your drinking water, or we take it out of the wastewater after it's been used, or we take the solid waste to the landfill. So everything that we do is pretty much focused on human health and safety. That's what we do. You've heard before about redoubling our efforts to improve our water supply reliability. Very robust effort that's been underway for the last 6 years. This year's drought that we're currently experiencing would have probably been worse on us had we not started those efforts some 5 or 6 years ago. My only wish is that we would have started them 26 years ago or something like that. But we really hit the ground hard, and we're continuing to hit the ground hard to make sure that we're as safe and reliable as we can be. Obviously, we use aquifer storage and recovery as a key tool in that component, but we also have been investigating additional surface water conveyance connections with our neighboring utilities so that we can move water back and forth between utilities in some, frankly, some quite unorthodox ways that we haven't really thought about doing before. And it looks like some of that could really pay off for us. So that's really a big focus for us there. And then lastly, investing in well-planned infrastructure and growth. As you know, we've got a couple of projects underway right now that are to the tune of $100 million with respect to the expansion of Pleasant Grove Wastewater Treatment Plant. Multi-year project to get that done because it's very, very large, but it's a project that's going in conjunction with our energy recovery project at Pleasant Grove. Very advanced projects. We hope to provide a lot of benefit to the citizens. Again, the types of projects that we can do only because we own all of our own utilities in Roseville. We don't have the trash company competing with the gas company that's competing with the electric company. That because we own these utilities, we can make smart investments to help each other out. The last point I'll make is we've really started to sort of reinvest in some of our core neighborhoods and aging infrastructure. A lot of our time in the last 30 years or so has been focused on new growth out west, and that's appropriate because that's where the new growth is happening. But at the same time, we can't forget about where the water flows through the core neighborhoods. And so you'll see, if you've been over near Douglas lately, you'll see that we're tearing up streets and doing all kinds of great things like replacing water lines, replacing hydrants, putting in new services for a lot of our older neighborhoods that we need to take care of. We have other neighborhoods planned into the future, but at the same time, we're taking care of the underground utilities and hopefully taking care of it at once so that we don't repave a street and then have to come back and tear it out because the water line broke, which is quite common when you go into older areas. We're trying to get it all done once and then pave it nice and be done with it for a long time, so knock on wood there. So I think I've covered everything on this slide. The next page, I think, is the time that you get to ask questions.
Great. Does anyone have any questions of Rich? I'll start with you, Councilman Alvord.
The wastewater treatment gallons, I noticed it went from 6,300 million gallons 2 years ago to 6,200 last budget, and it's also estimated to be the exact same for the next one. I see increases in the other areas, but for the wastewater, I was just surprised that didn't go up as well. I was thinking, well, maybe it was because of conservation, possibly, because we have growth going, but we have the freshwater coming in, so I'm just curious why we don't have as much wastewater going out.
Yeah, it's an interesting puzzle, because like Michelle talked about earlier, water's cheaper. The more of it we produce, the more efficient it is per unit, but yet we pay people to conserve. Much of our wastewater system was designed assuming a certain return flow of water back to the system. Our efforts in water conservation have gotten so good over time that we're struggling at times to make sure that everything goes to where it needs to go because of lack of water. We've been so efficient on the water side. So while our how do I say this? While our hydraulic capacity of the plant is relatively stable, it is going up nominally. It's not going up like other things are going up because of those conservation measures. The other reason, obviously, the plant is being expanded because the total load on the plant is increasing, and it's increasing on the other sides. The biosolids, other things that are coming to the plant, those are tracking much more proportionally to population, if you will, but the fluid component doesn't grow with population at the same rate. Hope I'm saying that correctly.
Well, I'm assuming it's like a rounding thing, because it looks like, we're using more water, we have more acre feet coming, we got more recycled water going out, solid waste is going up, but the treated wastewater is the same. But again, maybe it's in the millions of
it's in the millions,
rounding
yeah.
or something.
That's part, but it is to that point. It's more flat than any other. It's not growing off the charts like you would think.
Okay, thank you.
I'll show you what it looks like.
Got nothing.
Anything over here?
Rich, the only question I had for you is, you were talking about the pilot program with the green waste and like the 3 cans and things.
Yes,
are we doing another pilot program?
We are.
And then see how that goes? And
We are. We're conducting our second pilot right now. We tried an established area of Roseville, tried to get the right, sort of the right mix. Now we're trying a newer area of Roseville out west. Where we're aware of there's different size houses, different size lots, different configurations, and frankly, there's different people that moved in relatively new to the city. So part of what we want to test is how do people's attitudes about recycling change, given where they've came from or where they've moved from, as opposed to Roseville. We'll probably similarly do another pilot a little bit later in the year, maybe in eastern Roseville.
And you were talking that in your pilot program, it comes every week. Or the green waste comes every week?
Correct. Actually, on the pilot project, all of our services come, and we're piloting a 3-can system. So where there's a black can that's just for waste, and then a blue can for recyclables, both cardboard and plastics, and then a green can, which is for yard waste and food waste. So those all three get collected once a week.
Okay. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay, now we'll open it up to public comment. See if there's anyone here tonight that would like to address this item, or if anyone wants to call in. The phone number to make a public comment is 916-774-5353. And I don't think anyone will. Thank you. I'll close public comment. Only almost to reopen it again at the end of our meeting, right? So if there's anything anything that anyone would like to call in or comment on, any item that's not on the agenda, we always do a close public comment at the close of our meeting. So anyone can come forward or call in again. The phone number again is 916-774-5353 to make a public comment. And I'll close public comment. There's nothing here this evening. Dom, is there anything else that you want to add?
I do. I had just some quick closing comments, but I would like to answer Vice Mayor Haddishell's question about the council budget. Typically what's in there is the small stipend that the council receives as part of the funding, but the larger amounts are actually the SACOG fees for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and then also LAFCO. LAFCO is the land agency forming committee that we belong to within the county, and we have to pay per capita to belong to that, and typically that comes in with annexations. And as Councilman Albert knows, he's our seat on that committee. But so those types of fees are a part of what makes up that budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is GSEC part of that too?
No, GSAC was until probably 2 years ago when it was moved into economic development because of all the economic development activity. And with SACOG, it's with transportation and planning, it doesn't fit quite as neatly into a department, just like LAFCO really doesn't. And so that was kind of the move behind the legislative advocacy piece as well, is it fit really nicely into public affairs and communications where that budget was managed, and that was part of the decision behind that move.
I saw that Cap to Cap was also in there, which
Yes.
could get pretty, we didn't go last year, and this year, I guess.
But we are planning for something this year in that event, and so it would be budgeted for.
And let me make sure. What you said is that in the city council budget, there's $39,000 stipend for the 5 of us over the year. But what you're talking about is the membership fees, not the travel and meeting fees. You're talking about the membership fees to belong to SACOG, to belong to LAFCO.
That's correct.
Right.
That's absolutely correct. Just the membership fees.
What you asked. GSAC used to be there, but okay.
Okay.
It's kind of nice to say that and see that, because I think one of the council members mentioned someone looks at it and all of a sudden they don't know why we have that cost.
And while there's a great return on investment for belonging to those, they're quite costly.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it's great, but sometimes you go, what is it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. And just quickly as we close, I would like to say, as Roseville, I think we can be proud, of the city, is how we've responded and anticipated and adapted and weathered the COVID-19 pandemic. And I really think this budget is no exception to that. I think it took an incredible effort through here, and you can find that as part of the budget makeup. And as we anticipate more predictability and hopefully some normalization, we're going to start to see and have opportunities to not only overcome challenges, but find new ways to do business and new opportunities to take advantage of. And we think that this budget that's proposed before you helps us do that. And I also want to thank you, our city council, for continually sharing the vision and being committed and being here, and not only by the questions that you ask or the vision you share, but the actions you take every day. I hope that is seen in the budget as proposed tonight. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our incredible staff, not only the department heads you see here today, but the hundreds of staff that worked on this budget, but not only work on this budget, come in every day and put in the effort to provide the quality of life that we all enjoy here as not only those who work here, but residents here. As you know, we just participated in a national survey that gave our city not only marks over our peer cities, but some of the highest marks in the nation. And I think it's something that we can be thankful not only for this council, but for past councils and that leadership that has helped get us where we're at. We believe this budget tonight helps support and maintain those service levels so we can continue to provide those high quality of services. So with that, thank you. Thank you for your time, and we stand to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Well, we will wrap up our final comments. Start with Councilmember Alver. Do you have anything anything else?
I do not.
Okay.
No, thank you for that comment about the 1,200 plus employees here at the city of Roseville. Really, you reflected my thoughts. Thank you.
Echo my council members' comments.
The only comment I was going to say is when we had Jill come up and talk about Park and Rec and libraries, and it's really wonderful, which it is, but it made me think about, what also made that wonderful is because we have police, we have fire, we have maintenance people for the roads and things around it. People aren't going to go to the park if they don't feel that it's safe, or if something happened, they didn't have someone to take care of them. So it really is a whole group, a whole team to make Roseville. And it just made me really happy when I was thinking about that when I was listening to you. That's what makes the parks, what makes Roseville everything, is because they're working together to make it happen.
Yep, thank you. And just my final comments for tonight, listening to all of the departments. Well, I love Roseville, and I think we're all here because we love Roseville. But I just think it's important that everyone understands that what we've listened to tonight is the reflection of what our priorities are and what the vision that the council has set forward, which I believe is a shared vision, which with each of the department heads. This budget, it aligned exactly with what we have laid out, the council. We want to be fiscally conservative. We want to have a fiscally conservative approach. We want to be able to pay competitive wages, allows for the delivery of high standards and high services. We want to pay down debt. We want to address our pension obligations. We want to anticipate and account for potential recessions, which is critical, and seek revenue opportunities. So I think that you all nailed it, and I think that all the information that we have here tonight is a team approach. It's the council, it's all of you as department heads, it's every person that you work with, and I think that we all understand that and know that so much of time and effort goes into this. So I just wanted to thank you, Dom, for leading everyone, and for all of you for being here tonight. So, and Stephanie, you did a great job. Good job.
Good job.
So with that, we will be back tomorrow night for our regularly scheduled council meeting, June 2nd, and then a following one is June 16th. So we'll see you all back here tomorrow night. Thank you very much.